Well lads, trying to make some tea at the moment, but I'm just struggling with the amount of milk to add to it. I can never get it right. You know, maybe just a little bit more. I don't know. What do you think? Balance is a hard thing to achieve in both tea and games, especially with the amount of different opinions going around on the topics, though there is one universal agreement: you can have way too much milk. But there's one mechanic that really needs a careful hand in this regard, more than most in my opinion at the very least, being healing. And healing takes a lot of different forms. Potions in Pokemon, holy magic in D&D, and whatever the hell Mantis is doing to you in Marvel Rivals by making you forget that you're in pain. And the last one is what I really want to focus on for this topic, for one main reason. Healing in single player and multiplayer games is different. In single player, it's obviously just the player who chooses how much to heal, which often has an extra cost attached to it. In Xenoblade 2, you need to take time to build up an art or to change your position and stop attacking to chase down a potion. In a turn-based RPG, you lose the chance to deal damage by taking the opportunity to reverse the enemies. And with all this, the developer has full control over the balance of it. Now, whether or not they do a good job is a different story in a case-by-case basis, but the primary thing is that they only need to keep one player in mind. The experience of that player is their only concern. In multiplayer, obviously the experience of multiple players has to be considered. The healer, the recipient, and the aggressor, all of which can be and often are plural. In single player, if healing is too weak, it's disregarded. Too strong and it removes the tension and difficulty. However, a good developer will have a great balance of the strength of it with a lot more control. The experience they wish can be fine-tuned far more easily when only one player has to be taken into account. Take Baldur's Gate 3, which has some incredibly well-balanced healing systems in my opinion at least, though that's more based on the fact that it is D&D. And then in single player games you can just get straight up lied to. This isn't exactly healing, but in Kingdom Hearts, Sephiroth has an invisible health bar on top of his actual one, so you feel like you're doing nothing. So I'm focusing on multiplayer games here, for multiple reasons. One, I need to stop talking about Atlas games. And two, I have a problem. While Overwatch is the subject I just brought up, honestly my focus is going to mainly be on hero shooters as a whole, as it's a genre where healing is honestly baked right into the core. I'll have mentions of other genres, but I'll primarily stick with the general shooter range. So let's start with this. Supports are usually the strongest class in any game that houses them, especially hero shooters. While they tend to not be as flashy as your damage dealers or even hold as large of a presence as your frontliners tend to, they're the ones who control the pace of and even control the battlefield itself. They're the ones keeping their team alive. Their cooldowns often create opportunities to advance or deny them from their opponents. They turn lost fights into winning ones, and this isn't always through insanely strong utility abilities, though it usually is. What it really comes down to is their primary tool, healing. The strength of healing by itself is something you often don't see many discussions of, or if you do, it quickly turns to insults within seconds. But just to demonstrate my point, I want to use an example from Pokemon because I've been playing way too much Gen 5 OU recently. Tentacruel with leftovers and Rain Dish versus a Gengar spamming Shadow Ball. Now damage depends on so many different factors, a lot of them being random, so for simplicity's sake, let's say that Gengar is just doing 35% for every single hit. 3 hits and Tentacruel would die normally, but it heals 12% each turn, meaning it takes 4 hits to actually KO. Tentacruel's health during this exchange wasn't 100%, but rather 136%. If this Tentacruel had Protect in its moveset, and it used it every other turn to restore that HP, that effective health increases from 136% to about 244%, or roughly 13 total turns until it dies. It's still Pokemon after all. Anyway, this part is a really important aspect of healing as a whole, specifically within hero shooters. As we all know, hero shooters carry the classic MMO and RPG trifecta of tanks, damage dealers, and supports. Now let me raise you something. I think I'm gonna do stupid questions for 500. Stupid question for 500 it is. Why is it harder to kill a tank than it is a DPS or a support? The obvious answer is more HP. We can all go home now. But realistically, it's not always that simple. Tanks often have damage mitigation as a part of their kit. Think shields, damage reduction effects, raising terrain, anything of that variety. In a vacuum, these help the tank, well, tank. They can lead the charge solo while protecting themselves and the team. But remember that Tentacruel with Protect earlier? Damage mitigation combined with healing isn't additive in its strength, it's multiplicative. Take 2 Annas shooting Orisa, and please note for this that Anna ignores armor. Her damage and healing are both 75 per shot, meaning that the Orisa they're targeting will stay pretty consistently at the same HP. That is, until Fortify gets involved. Currently, Fortify reduces damage by 45%, but I'm just going to use a version that reduced it by 50, entirely because it makes the mats look cleaner. With 50% damage reduction, every health point is worth 2. So while the attacking Ana has her damage halved, the healing Ana has nothing changed, meaning her 75 health heal is effectively granting Orisa 150 HP. Instead of having the healing per second and damage per second fight over the health bar like it normally would, a damage mitigation being involved, whether it's a barrier that outright blocks it, or any form of damage reduction at all, it results in the healing always winning out. Especially since in most cases, healing as a resource is extremely plentiful. Medic's heal beam lasts as long as he keeps it connected. In my last example, Ana does have to reload, but that downtime does not mean much until you get into elo ranges where people have brains. Mantis has a resource split between healing and damage boosting, but she recovers it on headshots, meaning so long as you have the skill, you've got near limitless heals at your disposal. Both of these tools being available is what makes healing so strong. Why do you think Hazard is an insane brick wall compared to Roadhog? Or why Strange was so strong when Rivals released? I mean, to take it even further with Overwatch again, because I've got a problem. Why do you think Bastion's self-repair perk is so strong? Infinite healing, he has armor for damage reduction against most of the cast, and can increase that even further if he enters Sentry form, and that's ignoring his other bonus health perk. This is what I mean by the Healing Tightrope. In a vacuum, healing and tanking capabilities are pretty solid. A tank can tank well solo, supports can acceptably heal other supports or DPS, but when they combine, this is when we come across these near indestructible walls. Now that's not 100% fact. There are so many cases of just the healing being far too high, or just the ability to mitigate damage being so strong that it completely offsets the healing. But it's even worse when both of these concepts mix. 3 words that would traumatize any League player are Season 11 Goredrinker. But what am I getting at? Obviously, I've iterated and reiterated my point that the strength of healing is heavily tied to tanking, with how damage numbers often fall in these games, unless you're like me and have days where you can't hit a target whose keyboard disconnected, and then days where you're accused of cheating. Killing a DPS or a support with a support surgically attached to them isn't terribly frustrating. It fucking can be though. But when it's a tank who already has the ability to mitigate the damage they receive, the process of killing them can be infuriating when their effective HP is absolutely skyrocketing. So is there a fix? It's a game-by-game type case, and in the first place, I didn't really set out to solve healing as a concept, I just wanted to talk about it. I mean, in TF2, the counter to a medic is unironically the most Reddit answer you could think of. Just kill him. Whereas in Paladins, a global anti-heal percentage was applied across the entire game, which functioned incredibly well since healing was a near global concept thanks to its item shop, but I'd also like to note that I have seen fresher corpses than this one. So can you balance healing in hero shooters? You can try. Counters have been tried before, I just mentioned Paladins, and then even Overwatch has its own version with a full heal block and a heal percentage reduction on DPS characters, but both of these have had their issues. Ana's nade made her a menace in 5v5, while the DPS passive's execution made it overwhelming on certain characters, though I've already discussed this in a pretty old and kinda video, but the info holds up fairly well. Then you have Marvel Rivals, which is honestly taking the TF2 route of just kill them, alongside also trying to direct every support to just being a heal bot. And that's kind of the crux of this discussion. Balancing healing is just a tightrope. Too weak and it's just not used whatsoever. Too strong and they're dominating the game. And all this is even worse to me when I'm very much a support not healer type person. Yes, they should heal if the game is designed around that, but I nearly say creating more utility-oriented supports rather than heal bots is absolutely the way to go. They're just so much more interesting. But all my examples so far have been very much a demonstration of what too much healing can do, and I haven't really shown what the reverse looks like. And for that, let's take a more extreme angle, CSGO. There is no healing in CS, which does affect how it's played. Players tend to sit and hold one angle, waiting for others to peek, because every bit of damage is permanent, so they can't exactly afford to run out guns blazing. And this works perfectly, it's CSGO, a tactical, slow-paced shooter. Which also gives me another chance to actually show how healing can severely mess with things. When you take CSGO and add healing, alongside 20 epilepsy warnings, you get Valorant and Sage, whose healing and resurrection have received 9 changes over the years, 6 of which being nerfs. Now that's not nearly as egregious as her wall, but it shows yet again how volatile going from no healing to even a little bit changes a game. Players could afford to be far more aggressive, as any damage they took could be reversed even if their HP reached 0. Now that example isn't quite the best, as CS was designed with no healing from the very beginning. A better look into what too little healing can do is actually pretty hard to achieve. Any game that has a dedicated support cast, or healers as they turn out to be, which is an entirely separate issue that I've already alluded to, regardless, when a full section of characters is dedicated to healing, you won't often see issues with healing lacking in supply across the games. However, it can be seen with individual characters in those games. The obvious example would be that character just falling out of the meta. Take Ana in Overwatch during the double shield meta. Unlike Moira, Lucio, or Baptiste, or even Mercy, who all have something that allows their healing to bypass shields, Ana is completely stonewalled by them, meaning she never had much of a presence during the peak of double shield, as she just couldn't support her team in that type of environment. The other possibility of healing being too weak would be those same characters becoming dead weight to their team. Now that is basically what I just said about Ana, but in this case Ana was still strong and could still be used in the right situations, they were just far fewer than before. A complete dead weight of a character has no uses in any situation, and just to portray my example a little bit better, let's use a hypothetical. Rocket Raccoon in Marvel Rivals. What does he do? Heal. Sure, he's got a Resurrect for his team, some small armor packs alongside those weird jump packs, and one of the worst ults in the game with a 40% damage boost for anyone in range. But the biggest thing that he provides is raw healing. His damage is non-existent, and his utility is just healing in different fonts. Say Rocket's healing gets lowered, he becomes a waste of a team slot unless every other character in the game has their healing lowered as well. If that 70 healing per second went down to 50 or even 60, his impact would take such a dramatic hit that the rest of his kit does not make up for. Now comically enough with this hypothetical, Rocket is already a bit of a waste of a slot in the first place because of how strong healing is as a whole in Marvel Rivals, so you don't need a character who's entirely dedicated to just healing. A Mantis who can give her team consistent healing, alongside damage boosts to churn out solid damage, and even some stuns for enemies, offers far more than a Rocket does, which nearly goes across the entire cast of supports, but once again that's a separate discussion entirely. I've seen ideas thrown around, like making healing percentage based instead of flat numbers, but that has so many implications and potential problems. I've also seen people say to lower healing's effectiveness on tanks, but not every tank has the same level of damage mitigation, so a flat amount across the whole cast would throw at least a few picks out the window in certain scenarios. It's a catch-22 situation where no side is easy to please. There is one way that it could be handled though, which is the only method I can think of that I would say is pretty spot on, being that the healing's potential targets should be its limiter when designing it. What I mean is a high healing per second ability should be limited to a single target heal, while an ability that heals in an AoE or that just affects multiple targets should be a low healing per second, exceptions being made for ultimates or high cost abilities of course. But again, I'm not here to talk about healing solutions, I'm just a nerd who likes to talk about games. Healing is a touchy subject, but there's one thing that I want to make clear, and it's that it's never in a vacuum. I already showed how it's connected to tanks and damage mitigation, but it's also tied into regular damage and even other sources of healing. So many factors need to be considered when adding this mechanic, as simple as it seems to a game, which is why this tightrope exists. You know, healing, while a concept that seems daunting, if not impossible to balance, it really does make for an interesting discussion. And it also does kind of serve as a basis to prove that supports are often the strongest class in whatever game they're in, even more so when a truly skilled pilot is using them. But you know something? This discussion has really proven one thing to me, and it's that I've finally gotten the insight that I need to create a proper cup of tea. Now just for a bit of milk. Wait, I forgot the tea bag. Wait a minute, this isn't a box of tea bags, this is just a box of milk!